Let's speak to the voices in our heads. Are they our voices? Let me tell you a story. So, for many years, I believed that I was unworthy. I believed that who I was in the world wasn't real, wasn't healthy. Who I was being in the world wasn't enough. I felt judged. I felt ridiculed. I felt less than. I felt unworthy. Can any of you relate? Have you gone through periods of your life as a child, as a teenager, as an adult, where you haven't fully felt yourself, where you've been scared to be in the world, or you've been so scared to be in the world, you've either pulled yourself back and you've hidden, or you've been hyper aggressive. You've had that mentality of attack first to protect myself. I've experienced both. And growing up, I had this idea that I wasn't good enough, or I had to be quiet. As a young child, I was living in immense fear. I lived in a volatile family environment. Father was massively abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive. We were pulled from home to home at different times, country to country. And while there were blessings in having family in different places, as a kid I felt very displaced, very not enough, couldn't speak properly, was overweight, was consistently told I was too fat, or I should stop eating, or I should not speak, or I would be hit for making noises. And so at the time, life was really scary. And I developed this idea of myself, this sense of self, these voices that were telling me this is the person that I am. Now, what I didn't realize at the time was that those weren't my voices. That wasn't really me speaking about me. That was me taking on the opinions or interpreting the opinions and the beliefs and the projections of others, other wounded people, i.e. my father. Now, we go through various rites of passage and various initiations in our lives. And at the time of what we are experiencing, often the pain and the challenge and the difficulty, it doesn't feel like it's a rite of passage. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're going to get through this. And when we get through this, we're going to accumulate greater wisdom. We're going to feel better about ourselves. We're going to grow and expand. And this challenge is actually helping us. We seldom think that and feel that at the time. What we often feel is despair. And the despair compounds in and of itself, and it becomes worse, and the despair grows, and the difficulty and the challenge and the pain grows, and we get lost in that more and more and more and more. And that becomes massively painful for us. And so at the time, whilst we are potentially going through an initiation, if we allow it to be that, a life initiation and a rite of passage, growing into the next version of ourselves. And those voices that we experience, the inner critic, the self-dialogue, the ego self that's formed during our developmental years, as mine was, as yours is and was, it's helping us be a grander version of ourselves. It's helping us prepare for life as adults. But it comes from this survival protective place. So as an adult, I took these voices and I wanted to still function in the world. I wanted to experience pleasure and joy and happiness and connection and intimacy. All the things that I felt I didn't experience as a kid. Growing up in a traumatic environment, a volatile environment, what was next? Sometimes it'd be the middle of the night and I'd hear my parents screaming and shouting and fighting. Sometimes my dad would burst through the door and start blaming us for how he was feeling. Some of you may be able to relate to this in different ways. You have your own versions of trauma or wounding or difficulty that you experienced as a child. And so we take on these voices that, oh, maybe you hear just once your teacher say, you did that wrong, do it better next time. And you interpret that as if I'm wrong. You think that you were wrong. And you carry that belief. And then you find reasons for that to be true in your environment, because the reticular activating system looks for familiarity. The brain is a pattern recognizing machine, matching patterns in its environment. And patterns are familiar, and familiarity is safety. And so we look for safety. The ego self searches for safety. And so we reinforce these ideals that we keep telling ourselves, these voices that aren't necessarily ours. Now let me get to the space part of this. Space and stillness and silence. Perhaps one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves is space. Create space in our lives to listen to ourselves, to distinguish between the voices. And know that healing ourselves, healing our trauma, our past, forgiving, feeling and healing and releasing, it's a process, and there are layers to that process. And some point we may reach this awakened state where we needn't go into our trauma anymore, and we needn't go into, there aren't any nuances or any minutiae of our trauma. There's no layers to delayer anymore. And you'll know when that is the case. You'll know when you've reached that point of embodiment, that place of depth and clarity. And so space and stillness and silence, it gives us an opportunity to assess ourselves, to feel deeply into our hearts, to open up our souls, to understand, are these our voices? To ask the question, is this voice mine? As an adult, when I would be in relationship, previously, we would be having an argument. I would be being pushed to my edge. Maybe she was not insulting me, but doubting me. I experienced a lot of that as a kid, where my father would doubt, even my mother would doubt, people around me would doubt. I would keep looking for reasons for more people to doubt me, to reinforce that belief, that ideal. And so the voice inside my head was, I'm not enough. I'm not speaking truth enough. My truth is that I am lost within myself. The truth is that I don't feel connected to my soul. The truth is I'm wrong. The truth is I'm confused. But that wasn't the truth. They were the voices, and I kept reinforcing those voices. And so as an adult, I'd be arguing with my partner and she would be doubting me. And that voice would come up, you're not good enough. Protect yourself. She's doubting you. Protect yourself. You're an adult now. You're not a little kid that is scared. Protect yourself. So I'd lash back. I'd be emotionally and verbally violent and abusive. I'd go way beyond what was actually happening because I was interpreting that as her doubting all of me as opposed to her questioning what is happening, because she was confused. She was maybe coming from pain. I couldn't see that because I was so caught in my unresolved, unhealed trauma and pain that all these voices came up. You're being doubted. You're not enough. This is exactly like it was when you were a child. Attack, protect. And we do this in relationship, and I did this for so many fucking years. All the different voices that told me I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't capable enough, I was unattractive, I was wrong, I wasn't a good, healthy person. So I would bring that into relationship and consistently be defending myself, and in defense we attack. We're coming from ego protection, not vanity, scarcity, fear of being seen, scarcity of losing what little control we have. So I'd always need to be in control because I wasn't in control as a kid. And so until I started spending time with me, being in my own space, listening to my own voice, distinguishing between all the different voices, and not bringing those foreign fear-based voices into my relationships, into my romantic relationships, then my romantic relationships grew. Then I expanded and grew as a person. Then I found truer versions of myself. Then I saw who I truly was. Then I began to revere and respect myself, love myself. Then my sense of self-worth began to raise because I wasn't listening to the voices that weren't my own. I was able to feel the pain around those voices through certain processes, through shamanic ritual, through psychology, through counseling, through spiritual healing, through acute observation, my own solitude practices, being in stillness and silence, and creating space for myself to understand who was I being, where was I coming from, what was really at play here, what was I really feeling and paying attention to, who was I? Not who was I told I was, who was I? How did I see myself? How did I feel myself through the world? When I did that, when I stepped into that power, that was a game changer for me. Because I began to be less reactive and more responsive. I came from my truth and ceased to be so offended, so quickly, easily offended, and felt that I was being attacked in a relationship. I was able to hear, be compassionate, be there for my partner, see that when she was coming from a wounding, I didn't have to take that on. I didn't allow that to be projected on me. And because I was healing my wounding and my own pain and my negative, my misconceptions of self, I was able to show up for her fully, to be present to that and not take that personally. And that diffused the entire situation. And we grew together. We grew in love. And I continue to do my best to be that person in every situation that I can be that person. And it doesn't always happen. Let me tell you that very simply does not always happen. I lose my shit. I become reactive. I come from fear. I come from scarcity. I come from old patterns, old thoughts. It's like the other day I had a shameful experience. I had an accident and I experienced massive shame. And I was responsible for that. It was my fault. And almost all of the shame I've ever experienced in my past came to me and I couldn't deal with it. I was fucking overwhelmed. And so I just took it out on the world. I took it out on the world and I lost my shit literally a few days ago. And I lost myself in that. And it took me less than 24 hours to come into equilibrium and deal with the shame and deal with that. And that's great. Usually I would never just deal with it. As a teenager, as a young adult, I wouldn't have ever dealt with it. I just would have let it be. Time would have run its course and it would have softened it, but I never would have dealt with it because I never addressed it. I never went into it. I was never deliberate with it. And I just would have continued to lose myself and then allow those voices to be dominant in my mind and in my heart and in my body and play out in my relationships. So fuck those voices because they're not yours. Pay attention to the voices that are yours and bring them into your life. Be inspired and fueled by your own voice. And really the only way to distinguish between your voice and the voices of other critics, because your inner critic is fueled by those external voices that you grew up with, that impacted you, that you allowed yourself to be impacted by. I've done it. I'm sure you've done it too. If you have done it, let us know. Because the first step to that self-awareness is ownership. Put a yes, put a love heart. Begin to step into that and own it, because I couldn't grow until I owned my shit. And if we don't continue to own our stuff, we continue to remain stagnant in our lives and in our relationships. And so when we create space in solitude and stillness and silence to listen to ourselves, to hear those voices, and to really distinguish between the truth in our voices, then we grow and expand. And then we don't bring that density and that garbage, that darkness. There's nothing wrong with the darkness, but if we continue to bring that into relationship, we're imbalanced. We don't bring that density into relationships, so we're not projecting and blaming and shaming others in order to protect ourselves, to protect that inner child, because that's what it is. The voice, even the voice of the inner child that's coming out, yes, you are worthy, we are worthy. The voices of that inner child that is coming out and saying run or protect, it's because he or she is still scared, still stuck in a cycle of fear, listening to the voices of others. When they've projected their own pain, hurt people. And so my invitation to you is to create space in your life, 20 minutes a day to be in your own stillness. Don't write, don't read, don't journal, don't listen, don't watch, just be. Eyes closed, eyes open, just observe and just be with your own thoughts. Maybe you'll be very deliberate and ask yourself, this thought of unworthiness, is it really mine? And you may explore that, but just be with your thoughts, be with yourself and practice that. And you will grow beyond measure and you will bring a greater, more empowered version of yourself into your relationships. And that will liberate you and accelerate who you become and who you are and how you show up in relationships. More importantly though, how you see, treat and feel about yourself. Power and blessings to you people. If this video has resonated with you, drop some love, share this video, and know that you are fucking worthy. You are so, so worthy. Power and blessings.